You're listening to the Music Tech Teacher podcast, episode number 24. Welcome to the Music Tech Teacher podcast. Music tech tips, lesson ideas, advice, news, and interviews, especially for music teachers. Brought to you by midnightmusic.com.au. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Katie Wardrobe from midnightmusic.com.au, where you can find music tech online courses, lesson plans, tips and support just for music teachers. Now, today is a solo episode. I'm not chatting to anyone else. I thought I would just do one that's by myself and just talk through some things about film scoring, which is one of my favourite topics to do and projects to do with students and also in teacher workshops. I'm going to mention a few links today, and you can find a list of the links that I mention in today's episode at midnightmusic.com.au/24. So as I mentioned, film scoring is a fantastic project. It's a great music tech project for students to do, and it works really well with students of a wide range of ages. It's been on my mind a lot lately because I've just finished an online film scoring course that's gone into my online community, which is called the Midnight Music Community. Very descriptive name, I know. And as a project, I really find that film scoring can teach students so many great skills, and they are both technical skills and also musical skills as well. Things like synchronizing sound to visuals and recording and editing sound effects and composing original music that sets a mood or represents a character, and much, much more. So much can be wrapped up into this one project. As I mentioned, it works really well with students of a wide age range from middle school right through to upper secondary. I've done film scoring projects with students in grade 5 right up to students in year 12, so senior year levels here. Now, I use the same approach no matter what age group I'm working with, but I just tend to adjust the expectations. So, with the younger students, you might use some perhaps ready-made music and they are choosing a style of music to apply to their film scoring project and just composing a little aspect of it, a small part of it. Whereas with older students, you want them to be doing a lot more from scratch, and it might be a longer project as well, something that's a bit more involved. Now, over the years of doing film scoring workshops with teachers, I've actually found that the same questions come up over and over. And this is, again, one of the reasons for doing a whole podcast episode about it. Questions come up frequently like, where do I find movies to use for film scoring projects? How long should the movies be? What about copyright? How does that work? What if the movie has a soundtrack already? Where can I find free sound effects to use or for my students to use? What software should I use for film scoring projects, and how can I do it on iPads or Chromebooks? And there were a few more frequently asked questions too. So I thought I would cover all of those in this episode, and I'll also talk a little bit about the compositional approach that I take with students when doing film scoring, which is just my way of doing things. There are lots of ways that you can approach this, but I've found, something that works for me. And so if you've never tackled it before, you might want to give this a go, and then, you might change it for your own projects and for your own students. So let's start off with the questions. Now, software for film scoring. What are the software options that you can use to actually do film scoring with your students? Now, really, this type of software that you use, the actual program, and to some extent the device that you use, really dictates the types of projects that you can do. So music software that has some sort of video import option gives you the most flexibility with the type of projects that you can do. So with this regard, I'm referring to things like digital audio workstations, otherwise known as DAWs, and they would include things like GarageBand or Mixcraft or Acid Music Studio or Logic or Pro Tools, and there are many, many others. I won't list them all. The other option is notation programs that allow you to import video. So in this instance, it would be something like Sibelius or Finale, both of which allow you to import video. Now, the reason that these types of software programs give you more flexibility is that you can import the movie right inside the music software, and it allows you to line up specific sounds, so that's music or sound effects, with action points that are going on in the movie itself. Now, the other side of this is Chromebooks and iPads. I'm going to mention both of those because I get asked about this a lot. How can I do this on an iPad or with a Chromebook? Now, GarageBand on the iPad is different to the desktop version of GarageBand, and it does not allow you on the iPad to import a video. So you can't do the same type of project in GarageBand on the iPad as you would on the desktop Mac version of GarageBand. And Chromebooks as well, there's not yet a DAW, a digital audio workstation, that allows you to import a video into the music software. So iPads and Chromebooks don't give you as much flexibility with the types of projects that you can do with students. So I found that really the only thing that will work on these devices is to do a simplified type of project. And by this, it would be general mood music, which sets a tone for a scene or perhaps musically describes a character or a place. And you can kind of get students to create that music, and then they can pair up the music soundtrack with the movie in another app completely. So you're working separately on the music to the movie itself, and then you pair or marry up the two at the end. So in that sense, with the iPads and Chromebooks, basically you kind of need to know, well, my movie is, let's say 30 seconds long. So you go ahead and create a 30-second long soundtrack in, say, GarageBand on the iPad, and then you could send it off to iMovie, where you could basically combine the two together. But iPads and Chromebooks don't allow you to do that thing where you can go exactly to a point in a movie where you can see something happening, say a door closing, and add sound effect or a musical chord to that specific spot in the movie. So not as much flexibility, but it's definitely still possible to do something. So you could do a simplified version. Now, when it comes to movies that you're going to use, and I'll talk about where to find movies and what to do if they've got a soundtrack and so on, but just with regard to the software that you're using, you basically need to have the video already edited and as you want it before importing it into your music software, whether that's notation software or the digital audio workstation. Most of those software programs don't really allow you to edit the video as such once it's in the music software. So you need to kind of have it in the state that you want it in the first place. So for instance, if your movie is too long and you want to shorten it, maybe you want to chop the end off or chop the beginning off, you need to do that first in some other software. So this is where you might use one of the entry-level options like iMovie or Windows Movie Maker, or an online editing video software program like WeVideo. There's other options too. I personally do all of my video editing in my screencasting software program, which is ScreenFlow. And there's an equivalent for PC users, which is Camtasia. ScreenFlow is just for Mac users. And I do all my video editing in there. And that's just because I know that program really well. There's no point in me learning a whole nother video editing program because I know ScreenFlow really well. So I just import the video, do my editing, chop the beginning or end off, and create a nice fade out or fade in at the beginning where I've made the cut. And then I export it as a movie. And that's what I end up putting into the music software program. There are pro video editing options as well for software. So things like Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere Pro, if you've got access to those and you are comfortable using them, feel free to go ahead and do those and use those ones. So once your movie is edited and it's ready to go as you want it, one of the questions that's also frequently asked is how do you actually import it into your digital audio workstation or notation software? And with some programs, say GarageBand, you can actually drag it. If you're on a Mac using GarageBand, you can see the movie file in the Finder window and you can actually drag it straight into the GarageBand project screen. That works okay. But in all software programs, you need to just look for the place where there's some import option. So often you'll go to the File menu and look for Import Video. In Mixcraft, I think it's the Tracks menu, and then you are going to look for something about importing a video. I think in GarageBand on the Mac desktop, you go File menu and then choose Movie and just work through the steps there. All of them will have something like that. So you just might need to have a little look around for where the import option is. Now, with all of these programs that I've come across anyway, and I'm talking the digital audio workstations here, there are kind of like two views of the movie. So one is that you can see on a track of its own in the project window, you can see thumbnails of the movie itself. Now, the thumbnail track is really useless for the film scoring part. So when you come to doing the music, you're not going to use that thumbnail track to line up specific action points in the film with the music that you're creating. The thing that is useful for is to see the total length of a movie. So when you import, say, into GarageBand or Mixcraft, you can basically see that the movie lasts for, 90 seconds or 60 seconds. And it gives you a sense of how long your soundtrack needs to be. So that's the type of thing that I use that for. The other view of your movie that you have access to is usually a preview window of some sort. And this is a floating window that allows you to actually see properly what's going on in the video. Now, once you import a movie into your software program, usually that window opens up automatically, that little floating preview window. Occasionally it doesn't, and so you might need to look for the place where you do actually click a button to open that preview window up. Now, the preview window can be resized. It can be made smaller or bigger while you're working on the soundtrack. So if you make it smaller, you'll be able to see more of your music tracks that you're working on. And if you make it bigger, you're going to be able to focus more on the video itself. So I find when I'm doing these projects, you're really resizing all the time. Some of the time you're working with it quite small because you don't need to see detail in the video. And then other times you need to make it bigger. The other thing that I find I need to do a lot is move that floating window around. So sometimes I might need to move it to the bottom of the screen because I need to see the top of the screen in the music software program because there's buttons or menus that I need to access. And at other times, I need to move it to the top because there's something down the bottom that I need to access. So again, you just need to kind of move it around while you're doing this work. And I'm going to move on to movies, actually where you find movies for film scoring and how short or long should they be and what to do if it's already got a soundtrack. So all of these again are really frequently asked questions that have come up in workshops that I've run over the years. Now, in terms of finding movies and copyright issues, I really try very hard to find movies that are either copyright free, so they might be in the public domain, or that they're Creative Commons licensed, which means that the copyright owner has given me permission to use that video. If it's a Creative Commons licensed video that you've found, you usually need to acknowledge the creator of that video. So that's one of the conditions of the Creative Commons license, is that you need to acknowledge the person. So what you would do is add some credits at the end of the video, and you would just add the listing to that video, what the video name is and the creator's name and where you found it and the type of license that you used it under. Usually when you download Creative Commons licensed videos, they have some text that you'll actually copy and use in your credits or on your website. If you're publishing it to a website, for instance, you would put those credits there. Now, there's places where I do go to find these Creative Commons and public domain videos. And one of the places that I go to the most is called the Internet Archive. Now, this is a massive website with lots and lots of awesome stuff on it. It includes audio, video, text, other things as well, which escape my memory at the moment. But they do have a whole moving image section, which is where they have their videos. You can go in there and you can search and download videos from there. Now, the only issue with this is that there are so many options. There's a lot of stuff on here and it can be a little bit overwhelming. I would never really send students off to do this because you could easily spend 3 or 4 whole lessons just looking for videos. I think it's really best if you as a teacher find the video first, edit it in whatever way you need to, and just provide students with the excerpt that they're going to use or the scene or the whole movie if it's a short one. That way the students are spending the important class time on the musical creation part, not searching for videos, which can just take so long. I've spent hours and hours looking for videos and it can be frustrating because I often want kind of specific things in the video. I don't often care what's in the video, but I want it to show maybe some sort of action because that's really good for film scoring. So I found that cartoons are a great place to start. The Internet Archive actually has a whole section of cartoons, and there's lots of well-known cartoons in there, which are, from early Warner Brothers days, because a lot of those are now in the public domain. So you can go and download really early Bugs Bunny movies and lots of other things, Popeye and many others, which again escape my memory at the moment, but there's lots and lots of things to choose from there. There's also one other thing to consider perhaps is using documentaries, and it can be fascinating if you ever watch a documentary or a sort of a non-fiction type show, even something like one of the cooking shows like MasterChef. We have MasterChef here in Australia, and I know it appears in other places in the world too. And the music that accompanies those episodes is really fascinating. If you turn the volume down, they're not nearly as exciting as when you have the volume up. And so, with that regard, you could look for documentaries, that sort of thing from the Internet Archive, which students could do and use for film scoring. So it might be just something about space or about some kind of animal, and they could create some music to go along with that to make it more interesting and exciting. Now, what I've done for members of my online community, the Midnight Music community, I actually have this whole course about film scoring in there. And what I decided to do, because it takes so long to search for videos and download them and then even edit them after that, because even the Bugs Bunny cartoons, while they're not very long, they're still maybe 5 to 10 minutes long. And that's just too long in my mind for a film scoring project. So what I've done for members of my community is I've downloaded a number of videos, and I've included ones that I've used over the years, which I have permission to share with people. And I've actually put them in there. So there's a collection of about, maybe 10 videos or so that you can use for film scoring projects. I've also included in there a few videos that I found over the years from film scoring competitions. And this is a great place to look for videos if you're ever looking for something for your students to use. There are, occasionally from time to time, places that run film scoring competitions, and they will provide a video for the competition itself. So what I've done is download the video and just saved that for then, using in workshops and with students. That's worked really well, and one of the most popular ones that I've found over time is the BBC have a stop motion animation series called Wallace and Gromit, and lots of you would be familiar with Wallace and Gromit, and they actually ran a film scoring competition some years ago where they provided short excerpts from a few of the Wallace and Gromit videos, and they provided them already edited and without the music. So they took the music out. The nice thing they did was actually to leave the dialogue in. So you can still hear the characters talking if there is some dialogue, but the music is gone from the background. So that's really useful because you still get the dialogue in there. So I've actually included those in the Music Tech resource bank that I have in my community, but you can also still download those from the BBC website. I've noticed recently that the page says that it's been archived up the top. It's still available, but I'm a little bit worried that someday soon it's just going to disappear. So if you want to download those videos, I'll put a link in the show notes and you can download them from there. Or if you're a member of the community, you can just log in and head to the Music Tech Resource Bank area and you'll find all of the videos in there ready to download. Now, the last option for finding videos is actually not to find one at all. It's actually to make a video. So you or the students, you can actually make your own videos and use them for film scoring projects. And this could be a great cross-curricular activity. So you might want to team up with a teacher of another subject, perhaps a media teacher or someone who's doing sort of the English language classes. That can be a great thing to do as a cross-curricular project. Maybe they make the video in another class, or maybe you can work with a drama teacher even, and then the students can use those and add their own soundtrack to it. This episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast is brought to you by the Midnight Music community. The Midnight Music community is an online space for music teachers who'd like help using technology in their music lessons. There are online courses, video tutorials, lesson plans, music tech news, and professional development certificates are provided for any training that you undertake. I'm inside the community every day, personally answering members' questions and sharing tips and ideas. The best thing is that you get to connect with hundreds of other music teachers just like you and share your own experiences and occasional music tech frustrations. For more information, And a special joining price just for the listeners of this podcast. Visit midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. That's midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. Now, the question of how long should the movie be, the answer to that one is short, really, really short, shorter than you think. So the first project that I do in my film scoring course, and this is the one that I've used for years and years and years now of running these workshops, the movie itself is, I think it's something like 12 or 14 seconds long. And basically in a workshop, I spend an hour at least on just this first video. And we talk through all of the tech aspects of using the video and how to import it and all that sort of stuff. And then we put really simple soundtrack to it and some sound effects. And so I've done this with students, and it takes a whole lesson. So a 40-minute lesson, this very short film. And it sounds like it's really, really short, but believe me, you can easily spend a whole lesson on just this 14-second long video. So with a second project to follow up, I like this really short one for an introductory project, but the second project to follow up where students are doing a little bit more work, getting a bit more involved, then I would use something a little bit longer. And for the longer project, I use videos which are generally around 1 minute in length, up to 1.5 minutes or so. And if they're older students, maybe around 2 minutes in length. But really, I think it's not necessary to go over that length unless you're truly planning on spending a lot of class time on this project. And I know for most people, this is just one thing out of, a larger, broader unit of work. So you probably don't want the kids to spend so long on it. I find it's better to use short movies where students can do a fully developed soundtrack with sound effects and the music, and they've thought hard about, the mixing and the levels, and they've added some, reverb if they need to and so on. Much better to spend a lot of time on a shorter movie than to have a half-hearted or half-finished longer thing. And it just means that there's more of a level of success and achievement for the students. Now, the question about what if a movie already has a soundtrack, and to be honest, most of the movies that you will download to use, they already do have a soundtrack to them. It's not a problem though. So with the digital audio workstation software, once you import the video into that software, basically you'll see two tracks. So one will be the video track, and that's the thumbnail track that I mentioned earlier. And directly underneath that usually is the audio track, and that is a separate track altogether. So at that point, you or the students have the option of deleting that track if you don't want it there at all, or you can even just mute it. If you maybe want to use some parts of it at some point in your project, students could just mute that audio track while they're working on their own soundtrack. Occasionally, you'll want to keep parts of the audio track in there because maybe there's dialogue that you still want to keep, but you want to cut out the bits which have music. So it really depends on the movie that you're using itself. Now, if you're using notation software, so Sibelius or Finale, you do need to remove the soundtrack before you import it into the software. So what I would do in that case is import the video into my video editing software. So for me, it would be ScreenFlow, but it might be iMovie or Windows Movie Maker for you. And once again, you'll see separate video and audio tracks, and you can just simply delete the audio track from there and then export the video without the audio part to it. Not too hard at all, really quite simple, and it's just really easy to do. So it opens up, you don't need to be looking for silent videos when you go looking for movies to use. You can find ones which have a soundtrack and then just simply delete or mute it. I often get asked what format should the movie be in, and this is a really hard one to answer because there are millions or hundreds of different types of video file formats, and each of the software programs that you're going to use to create your soundtrack accepts different types of video files within those ones. When I'm downloading videos, I usually look for the one that ends with .mp4 or maybe .mov, and they both usually work. And I just really experiment. I will just download the video, open up my software, my music software, and import it and see if it works. And you'll soon find out if it doesn't. It will give you some sort of error that the video file type is not supported, or you just simply won't be able to import it in the first place. If you do find that and you've got your heart set on using that video, there's other software. I use some free software to convert the video from one file type to another. The software that I use to do that is called Handbrake, and it's free. You just download it. You basically open up the video file in that. I won't go into the complete details of how to do it, but basically you choose which file type do you want to turn it into. You press the button and it happens. So that's quite quick and easy to do. So just experiment. If you can't get it to work straight away, I would just give it a go, try and convert it to a different type and see if that works. Really good if you're providing the video for students. I would do all of this ahead of class time, test it out, make sure you've got a format that works, because it can be really frustrating if you try to use a format that doesn't work with students and then half the class time is taken up with trying to change the file or fix it or something. So get all that sorted out first, see it working on your computer, and then you should be good to go. Okay, let's talk about using sound effects and ready-made music, because I do sometimes use ready-made music as an introductory step for film scoring rather than kids jumping into creating completely from scratch. So with sound effects, the question is often, where can I find free sound effects to use? And the first thing I would do is search the loop library, if there is one, of the music software that you're using. So, for instance, things like GarageBand and Logic Pro and Mixcraft on a PC and Acid Music Studio, they all have collections of sound effects that you can use in projects. You may not always find the one that you want, but there are an awful lot in there. And then there are options. If you can't find the thing that you need already in the loop library, there's a few things that you can do. Now, you can go off and search for sound effects, and this is a little bit like looking for the movies because it takes a long time. So I've done that thing where, let's say I've gone looking for a dog bark, and I go to a free sound effects website and I search for dog barking, and I get, 20 options pop up in a list, and I listen to the first one and then the second one, third one. And for some reason, I feel the need to listen to all 20 just in case there's a more perfect one at number 18 than there was at number 1, where the first one was probably perfectly adequate for what I needed to use. So it can take a long time to search and listen and download sound effects from websites. Having said that, if you do need to do it, there are a couple of places I've been to in the past, and two of the ones that I've used, one is called Orange Free Sounds, orange as the colour or the fruit, Orange Free Sounds, and another one is called freesound.org. And again, I'll put these links in the show notes. But before you go looking online for sound effects or sending students off, which, as I mentioned, is really time consuming, I would do a couple of other things first. So one other option is that you can get kids to record their own sound effects. Now, in the case of a dog barking, you can make a perfectly good impression of a dog bark sound if you just simply hit record and record a woof sound, in a deep voice. Now, that works really well, and I think that's a lot more fun in a way than going off looking for sound effects. It's certainly a lot quicker. And the added bonus is that students get the practice of recording audio. So they get the practice of making sure they've got headphones on, setting up a microphone if they've got one, making sure the environment's quiet enough for recording. All of these things are great skills for them to learn. So I would do that as a first option rather than going to search for something. Now, the other thing that you can do is, and sometimes I forget also, for myself, I forget that this is a great option, is that you can adjust the ones that you already have. Now, what I've done in the past, for instance, is in one project, I needed the sound of a little animal kind of screeching or squealing or something like an eek kind of sound. I didn't have one. So what I did was find this man screaming sound, like it's a man, it's a deep male voice doing this kind of blood-curdling scream. And what I did was I just transposed that sound effect up 2 or 3 octaves. And I think I also shortened it a bit as well because, it was a little bit too long for this animal to match up with this animal sound. So adjusting what you have is an excellent way of teaching students to think outside the square a little bit. So for instance, a door closing, doors sound different depending on what they're made of and what type of room you're closing the door in. So if they are wanting a door sound effect for maybe a big church or cathedral, there would be a lot of reverb involved with that sound as opposed to a door closing in a house where it's a bit more deadened sound. So you could find the house door closing sound effect and maybe add a lot of reverb to it to make the church door closing sound effect. So things like that, really good to get students to think outside the square a little bit. And again, they're using some extra audio editing skills and learning how to do that. Now, in terms of music, I mentioned that I've used ready-made music in projects before. So often my starting off project with students, which I'll describe in more detail in a moment, but often I get them to use ready-made music to accompany the soundtrack, and they get to choose the style of music and even compare a couple of different sorts of music. So sometimes it's good to use ready-made music in these early projects. And of course, you can again use the loop library if you've got one where there's lots and lots of loops available for students to access. Other places that I've gone to find free music to use, there's a great website called Incompetech. It's INCOMPETECH, Incompetech. And there's a great composer, Kevin MacLeod, who has a lot of music that he makes available under Creative Commons license for other people to use. The great thing about his website is that he has the database of all of his music, and there is a lot of music on there. It's sorted into styles and genres, or moods and genres. So you can either look up by jazz or blues or rock or pop or orchestral. But in addition to that, you can also search for scary or suspenseful or happy or angry and so on. And so that side of things makes it really useful for film scoring. I've actually used his music when I wanted to find examples of suspenseful music. I went to his website and listened to a whole heap of tracks and then just downloaded a handful which illustrated certain compositional techniques that I wanted to talk about in a workshop. And I've now used those same examples over many years, and that's been really, really useful. Another website that I've used in the past is called CC Mixter. CC stands for Creative Commons, and it's Mixter, MIXTER. And again, I'll put the link in the show notes for that one. That one I find a little bit harder to search for music. There's a lot of stuff on there as well, but also can be a useful place to go to. So that's my frequently asked questions section done. I'll just talk really briefly through the types of projects and how I've approached it over the years. And I've found this works really well. There are many, many ways to approach film scoring. And when I put the course together for my online community, I've got lots of suggestions for things that you should do even before you head into the music software and doing the composition part. There's so many awesome things you can do with listening. So I've added in there some listening worksheets that are kind of generic that you can use for any movie scene. So you can look things up on YouTube and then download a worksheet for students to fill out where they're thinking about how has the composer created the mood? What is the mood that they're trying to convey in this scene? And there are some great YouTube videos which compare a few different types of music with the same scene, which is a great activity to do. So again, there's a worksheet in there which will allow you to compare, or students to compare, two different types of music to go with the same scene from a video, from a movie. So that's a great place to start. There are lots of examples of, things you can listen to with students. John Williams is a great place to start, which, we'll go on, it's not necessary for me to say that he's a fantastic, prolific composer. I think at last count he's composed something like more than 200 movie soundtracks, which is just, it's very difficult to actually imagine that. And so he has a lot of examples, and there's some fantastic interviews with him on YouTube and all sorts of things about the techniques and things that he uses. Now, after introductory activities, I do a simple project to start with, and I mentioned earlier it's this, 12-second video or so, which involves a car driving from left to right across the screen and a dog. It drives past a dog at some point, and that's it. That's all that happens in it. So I use this really simple project, and I've got the movie inside the community. If you remember, you can go and download it and use it with your students if you'd like to. But this really short video works very well. So I tend to start with sound effects. So start by identifying sound effects opportunities with students and get them to match the sound effects with certain action points in the video, whether that's a general ambient sound, like the car driving sound, or a specific action point, like when you see the dog, it lifts its head, and so you can add a dog bark to that sound, and it looks really cool. So we start off with sound effects, and I love starting with sound effects because it's a simple way to get started with just working out the tech skills of using video inside a music editing software program. It gives students the chance to learn how to play back their projects and, what sorts of things they need to do, like zoom in so that they can see more detail in the movie and apply sound effects to a specific spot rather than not being able to place it exactly where they want to. We talk about, other tech skills that are involved. So, making a list of marker or hit points in the project. And then at the end of this simple first project, I get them to find 2 contrasting ready-made music loops from the loop library, and we drag both of them into the same project, and I get them to mute one and play back the movie with their first music choice, and then I get them to mute that one and play it back with the second music choice. And this is a great way to directly compare how different music affects the scene. Because if you get contrasting ones, it can be amazing the difference. One type of music might be very scary and the other one might be very happy. So the car driving along with the happy music, it sort of gives you the impression they're out for a Sunday drive. And then the scary one just implies that something bad is going to happen to the car. So it's really great to do that. Also in the preliminary activities inside the community in this course, I've got actually a video that I made, which is called Same Scene 5 Ways. And that's one where I applied different types of music to the same scene, which plays 5 times in a row with all these different styles. And there's a worksheet in there that you can use with students where they can fill out, how does the music make them feel for each of the types of music, and what are the compositional techniques that the composer has used. And for young students, that response might be very simple. It might be they've used short notes or long notes or loud music or soft music. And for older students, you would expect them to answer with more musical terms, like there's use of staccato or legato, or there's, dynamics which include fortissimo and piano, and so on. Now, after this simple project, I go for a more complex one. And this is usually a longer video. I've used in the past an excerpt from a 10-minute video called Big Buck Bunny. And I use an excerpt from that, which is just over a minute in length. Once again, we start off with sound effects, but I like to discuss the sound effects as a group with the students, and we talk about what we could do, but we approach it from hit point of view. So, a real film composer would approach things by sitting down with the director and working out all of the music for a scene. And they'll basically identify hit points in the scene that need to have some kind of action in the sound matched up to the action that's going on in the actual movie itself. So getting them to write a list of hit points is a great thing. And then they can also write some notes about what they're planning for the musical side of things. I tend to talk through compositional characteristics and techniques of different styles of music. So I often use suspense music. It's a nice, easy one to start with, but you could choose happy music or romantic or action music. And we talk about what are the stereotypical things in those styles that create that mood. And there really are very common things that go on with all of those different styles. So romantic music, for instance, has usually, a lot of string sounds, and it's legato and sweeping kind of music. And suspense music might use things like a drone, where there's a drone that just plays through a scene, and that gives you the impression that something bad is going to happen. Really easy for students to recreate because all they need to record is a single note, and that can instantly give an effect of a suspense scene. So once they've done sort of sound effects and hit points in a scene, I get them to compose music to bridge the hit points. And that, again, works really well. So we use the techniques that we've talked about when we've talked about suspense or happy or romantic or action music and other styles as well. And we talk about composing original music to bridge all of those hit points to fill out their scene. Older students might also like to approach it from a motif point of view, so getting them to compose a motif that goes with a specific character or a place or a time representing those things is another great approach too. I hope this has helped you and that you'd like to tackle film scoring if you haven't already. As I said, it's a really engaging project. It's possibly the most popular one that I've done in workshops over the years, both with students and teachers. And it's just such a great thing to do. It appeals to everybody all the time. It never seems to go out of fashion. So I really recommend giving it a go, even in a simple way. And I hope that this answered some of the questions. If you've had those questions in the past about film scoring itself, about where to find videos and so on, I hope this has answered some of those questions. Now, if you'd like step-by-step instructions and videos and downloadable resources and access to the series of videos which are copyright free and really good for film scoring projects, as I mentioned before, you can find all of that inside my online community. So I've got walkthroughs in that community of how to do these projects, exactly what I do and all the steps and the downloadable notes about doing that. And I'll show you a walkthrough inside programs like GarageBand too. Now, if you're interested, if you are a member already, you can log in and you can see that all straight away. And if you're not a member and you'd like to join, I've actually got a special offer for podcast listeners, which you can find at midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. I'd love to hear if you give film scoring a go. So you can actually comment under this podcast episode on my website if you're looking at on there. You could leave a comment and let me know if you've done it. I'd love to hear what you've done and how successful it was and if the students loved it. And just share those with me. Even if you've got examples of student work that you can share, which maybe live on YouTube and so on, I'd love to see those. It's very hard to find student examples sometimes, so I'd love to hear from any of you that have done film scoring in the past with your students. The Music Tech Teacher podcast is hosted by me, Katie Wardrobe. You can find more information and links from today's episode at midnightmusic.com.au/24. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.